Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Brahmagyanatimirandasya Gurananjana Sharapaya
Chakshurumritam Vena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapanayam Bhutale Swayanurupadamayam Dadadi Swapanandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Yupam Svagajatam Sarvadhanam Tathasrivam Sadharekam Savadutam Parijanasayitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Bhagavan Sadhanarita Shri Vishakam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kamita Radha Kanda Namaste Tata Manjana Gaurami Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamani Haripriye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Pranam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasasi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna everyone, thank you so much for coming. I was thinking in the next 2 days we could discuss a very interesting topic, the evolution of theism and the different religions, the different philosophies, the different teachers who have come over the ages and how they all connect together, and the progression between them, which I think could be an interesting topic. This was one of my questions when I came to Krishna consciousness, so it was always a very dear topic to me, that I always wondered, if there's one God, then why are there so many religions, and why are there so many different paths which seemingly say so many different things? And when I came and asked the devotees that question, the answer they gave me was very, very satisfying, and therefore I always like to share this with others. So I think we have till like 8:30, so we'll do it in 2 parts because there's a lot of information to get through, and at certain points I'll just stop and see whether you have any comments or questions or anything more you would like to know. Just to start with something from Srila Prabhupada, I'll just read a tiny little bit from the Bhagavad Gita. This is a very famous verse, perhaps a verse that most Hindus know for sure, because part of their religion was to watch Mahabharata on national television when it came in India, and this verse was always recited at the beginning. So you can, I'm sure you know it, you can recite it after me. Yada yada hi dharmasya bhavati bharata Tadatmanam srijanyaham. So the translation, and then it's a very long purport, so I'll just read the first part of the purport, which is relevant to what we're discussing today. Translation: whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharat, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. Purport. The word srajami is significant herein. Srajami cannot be used in the sense of creation, because according to the previous verse, there is no creation of the Lord's form or body, since all of the forms are eternally existent. Therefore, srajami means that the Lord manifests himself as he is. Although the Lord appears on schedule, namely at the end of the Dwapar Yuga of the 28th millennium of the 7th Manu, in one day of Brahma, he has no obligation to adhere to such rules and regulations, because he is completely free to act in any way at his will. He therefore appears by his own will whenever there is a predominance of irreligiosity and a disappearance of true religion. Principles of religion are laid down in the Vedas, and any discrepancy in the matter of properly executing the rules of the Vedas makes one irreligious. Only the Lord can manufacture a system of religion. The Vedas are also accepted as originally spoken by the Lord himself to Brahma from within his heart. Therefore, the principles of dharma or religion are the direct orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Dharmam Shushakshad Bhagavat Pranitam. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So here Srila Prabhupada is explaining, and Krishna is teaching us something very, very beautiful, something very, very important. That periodically what happens is that the Lord descends into this world as an avatar. The word avatar is very, very a beautiful word. Avatar, ava means to come, and tar comes from the word tarine, which means down. So literally what happens is periodically through time, the Lord, the Supreme Lord, descends from the spiritual world down to the material world for the purpose of reminding and reinvigorating and realigning the souls who are in this world with eternity, and showing them that there is another way, another place to exist, another path to happiness. And therefore, religion, Srila Prabhupada writes, he quotes a very famous Bhagavatam verse, Dharman tu shakshad bhagavat pranitam. Sometimes dharma is translated in different ways, but in this context we can say religion. And he says religion can only be enunciated by the Supreme Lord. Does anyone know what the etymology of religion is? Like what it means literally? Anyone know? Re mean
Characteristics of something. It's like sugar and sweetness.
okay, that dharma means the essence of something, that's true, but specifically the word religion, the Latin. Re means again, and ligare means to connect. So literally that which reconnects you with your essence, reconnects you, reminds you, provides you a link to that which you are originally part of. So what happens is that periodically the Lord comes down at different times, places and circumstances in order to give the same knowledge, but in a way that's relevant to the people of that time, and in a way in which they will be able to digest it and practice it. And so this was the answer that I received as a 15-year-old when I came in the temple and I asked the devotees, why are there so many religions? And the devotee said, because there are so many different living beings who are living in so many different situations, and who within each of them have so many different desires. And because there's such a variety in the world, what the Lord does is he provides the same message but in different ways in order to give all of those living beings an opportunity to make their journey back to the spiritual world. And therefore we say in Sanskrit, Desha, Kala and Patra. there are different times, places, and circumstances, and therefore religions vary. Essentially, old wine in new bottles. So it's packaged differently, although the rituals, although the culture, although the presentation seems to be different. In essence, every religion, when you look at them very closely, they are enunciating basically the same principles if they're actually coming from God. And therefore, when it comes to differences in religions, people take different stances. One stance is an exclusive stance, where some people will say, this is the truth, the way, and the light, and there's no other path except this. And they will say one religion is right and all other religions are wrong. That is not something that the Vedas agrees with. Another approach to the variety of religion and the different traditions that we see in the world today is pluralism. And this is almost right at the other end of the spectrum, where someone will say, it doesn't matter what religion you follow, it doesn't matter what you practice, everything is the same, and ultimately all paths lead to the same destination. Yata mata tata pata, one famous person said, that all paths, all roads lead to the same end. And the Vedas would also say we don't fully agree with this. These are two extremes. Rather, the Vedic teachers explain a system of inclusivism, whereby there are different religions, and each of these religions have truth. And by practicing each of these religions or philosophies with sincerity, one will gain traction and one will gain progress towards the supreme destination. However, they're not all the same, in the sense that each of them give a different amount of detail. Each of them give a different amount of progress and revelation of the character and the personality of the Supreme Lord. And therefore, in one sense, there's a unity between all the religions, because they can all give you progress. At the same time, there's a diversity because they differ in the amount of detail and the amount that they offer. Therefore, there's an evolution of theology between different paths. Let me ask you the question. What do you think are the ways by which you can understand which theology is the most advanced? What objective measures do you think we could use to determine, amongst all the theologies of the world, what the most advanced theology is? Can you think of any things that would, yeah?
It will give answers to 3 questions. Who am I? Who God is? And what are the connection with the God?
Okay, so you're saying it has a comprehensiveness of philosophy. Yeah. But all religions will answer that. So how do you know which one amongst them is the most advanced? Okay, you can think about it more. Yeah.
The level of detail they can provide on who God is. So one can say that, for example, God is in his impersonal feature. Some can say it's an impersonal feature. Others can say we know where God lives, we know who his friends are, we know what he likes to eat, we know what he likes to do.
Okay, great. So the detail of the philosophy will differ between theologies, and the one which has more detail, the one which has more insight, that we can understand to be more advanced. Yes?
The end goal.
The end goal, like what that theology espouses at the end goal. Is it enjoyment in the heavens, or is it pure love, or what are they actually saying is the ultimate destination? Yes?
The authenticity of where it comes from.
Okay, so you're saying the most evolved theology will have a greater authenticity, it will have more checks and balances.
Like it will be passed down from less interruptions from people between it, kind of be passed down from the Supreme.
Okay, good, yes.
The degree of transformation it yields.
Yes, the most advanced theologies will actually change people on a practical level, yes.
Who the philosophy is given to, so the listener of the philosophy when it was originally spoken.
Okay, so you can understand the evolution of a theology by who it was given to, what was the mentality of the people at that time, and how much were they able to digest. Very good.
One that hasn't strayed from the original teachings.
Yeah, one that has maintained its purity without being diluted, without being compromised in any way. Yes, very good, yes.
It would have faced test of time. I can go on.
It would have faced the test of time, yeah. This is also a very interesting point, that the most advanced theologies are relevant in all times, places, and circumstances, whereas the more preliminary theologies stand true or are powerful for a particular people at a particular time. But when you get to Sanatan Dharma, then it's an eternal religion. It doesn't matter what time, place, and circumstance. It is achievable. You basically got all of them. There's one more I'm looking for. Yeah. All right.
Well, we can make some reference to chapter 17 from Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled as Divisions of Faith. So, you know, the three energies are looked at: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And some people approach religion in Tamgun, some people in Rajagun, and some in Sattvagun. So I guess you have to look at the more, you know, advanced form, one of the high of energies, which is Sattvagun, mode of goodness. So if your practice sort of measures up to those particular qualities that are listed there in chapter 17, that gives you a good idea.
Yes, Krishna gives a delineation of sattva and the qualities, and does the faith, do the practitioners, and does the lifestyle and the effect of that engender sattva and adhere to that. Yes. Yes, that which awakens love. Is that? Yes, the most advanced theology has the greatest capacity to awaken love, and not just awaken love, awaken the purest type of love, because that verse then goes on to say, Ahaitaki apratihata yenatma suprasidati, a type of religion in which there is no motivation and there is no condition, but it awakens that, yes. There's one more I'm looking for actually.
Maybe I've got it. We should look at the conclusion of the Gita. Start with the Raman Parichita. Well, one time Prabhupada said, there's only one religion, and then he quoted that verse, which is about surrender. So with the right attitude, submission, let go, let God. You know, and then the verse prior to that, Manmana Bhavamadbhakta, which is about loving, thinking of the Lord, always absorbed, like, you know, like a lover and beloved, that kind of approach. So those two shlokas, 65 and 66, are kind of key that I think help us understand topmost.
The topmost, Krishna says, this is my paramam vacha, this is my supreme instruction. Therefore, even in the Gita, Krishna seems to give an evolution of thought. Yes. So,
I would say that the impact it has on the people,
yes.
like,
Similar to here, the transformation it creates.
yeah, and how, I mean, the mission, like, why are the people talking about that religion? What's the purpose behind it? How are they feeling about it? Is it coming out of linking it to Maharaj's point, is it coming out of a passion to achieve something, to do something? Or is it coming out to let everybody enjoy love and feel that love for their
Yes. That's very nice, yeah. Very good. I'm still looking for one more, which I think is really important actually.
Actually, it might be piggybacking on your idea, the benefit of the world. Like what
auspiciousness it creates in the world and what effect it has in order. Yes, because even it said devotional service is Shubhada. There's a verse explaining the effects of devotional service, and one of them is that it creates auspiciousness in all directions. That's good. There's another one.
Fellow of the
It's something to do with qualification. Yeah.
So I was going to say, it treats everyone equally. It doesn't make any distinction between.
Yeah, that's actually close. The other one I was thinking of is that the most advanced theology can be practiced by anyone. In other words, it makes itself so available that regardless of qualification, regardless of one's present state, that theology, like the best teachers, it's not that they just teach people who are already on a certain level. The best teacher can take anyone who's at any level and bring them up to the highest level of understanding. And similarly, the greatest theologies will also do that. So yes, I think you practically got them all. There could be more. These are the ones that just came to my mind. So these are the ones that came to my mind. So yeah, sometimes, the other one I was going to mention was beauty. That the most advanced theology is also the most beautiful in its poetic charm, in its ability to awaken wonder within the people who have that theology. Therefore, in the Vedic theology, you find so much beauty, poetry, description, so many touching narratives like that. So if someone ever asks us, like we say Krishna consciousness is the highest, the most advanced theology, and they say, well, you're just saying that because you're a Hare Krishna, then you can say, well, objectively, the highest theology has to meet these components or characteristics, and on an objective level, we could then establish that the Vedic path is the most evolved path, because in all of these categories, it meets the criteria. So this is just kind of like a beginning. Does anyone have any questions on this, or anything you'd like to ask? Yeah.
So when you say about the Vedic part, do you then also segregate it based on like sampradayas, and then even within the Vedic part, the different yoga, like the yoga ladder itself?
Yeah, and that's what we'll kind of be getting into, and we'll explain, also look at even within the Vedic path that there is a progression. And this is why, I wasn't going to go in this direction, but maybe I'll say it anyway. The philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't actually write down any books, but when he wanted to document his philosophy, then he enlisted Jiva Goswami to write something called the Sat Sandarbhas. And in the Sat Sandarbhas, Jiva Goswami basically outlines the philosophy and the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the first of the Sat Sandarbhas, which are 6 books of philosophical exposition, the first of the Sandarbhas is known as the Tattva Sandarbha. And the first thing that Jiva Goswami does in the Tattva Sandarbha is he establishes what is the ultimate book that you have to refer to in order to understand, what's the most advanced theology or understanding of God. And so this is, even in modern day philosophy has 4 branches, and one of the branches is epistemology. Anyone know what epistemology is? Epistemology is basically the theory of how you know something. So how do you know you know? And so what Jiva Goswami does in the Tattva Sandarbha is he explains that before you're going to be able to know anything, you have to know how you should know that thing. And so what he does is he goes through a progression. He says that if you want to know something, you could use 3 broad means. Your sense perception, your mind and logic, or you could hear from a higher source. And then he establishes that the first 2 are limited, and that if you want to understand the truth, you have to hear from a higher source, because our perception, sensually and mentally, is limited. So he establishes you have to hear from someone. But then he says, where should you hear from? That's the next question. So then through this kind of analysis, he explains that the Vedic path is the most elevated path to hear from. But then the next thing he says is, okay, you got to hear, and you should hear from the Vedic path. But in the Vedic path, there are so many different books. There are Upanishads, there are Aranyakas, there are Samhitas, there are Puranas. So what should you read? And then he establishes that amongst the Vedas, the Puranas are actually considered foremost. Purana means old, but Purana also comes from the word Purna, which means perfect. And so it said that the Puranas established the perfect conclusion of the Vedas, and therefore the Puranas are actually known as the Panchama Veda, or the fifth Veda. And so he establishes that you have to hear from the Puranas. But then he says there are 18 Puranas. So which Purana should you hear from? Then he says that the 18 Puranas are divided into 3. Those in Tamas, those in Rajas, and those in Sattva. And so he says if you want to get the conclusion, then you should read the Puranas in Sattva. Then he says, but then there are 6 of them. So which of them should you read? And then he establishes that amongst the 6 Sattvic Puranas, there is one Purana which is the Amala Purana, the spotless Purana, and that is Srimad Bhagavatam. And so before giving any philosophy, Jiva Goswami explains that even within the Vedic tradition, you will find many, many different ideas about religion. But if you want to understand what is the ultimate religion, then you have to go to the Srimad Bhagavatam, because Dharma Projita Ketavo Traparamo Nirmatsaranam Satam. The Puranas or the Bhagavad Purana throws away all cheating religion, all cursory religion, all subsidiary religion, and only propounds the highest truth for the benefit of humanity. And so yes, even within the Vedic tradition there is a gradation and a progression.
Maharaj, Puranas are in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance, or the person who reads are in the modes of goodness, passion, ignorance? Because we have heard Vedas are transcendental. So Puranas are in the modes, or the person who reads are in the modes?
Yes, the Puranas, spiritual knowledge can never be tainted, but when we say that the Puranas are in the mode of ignorance, for example, what it means is that it's giving instructions for those who are in the mode of ignorance, according to their level of understanding, in such a way that it will then ultimately elevate them to a higher understanding. Just like we say, devotional service can be in different modes of nature. So can you do devotional service in the mode of ignorance? Ultimately, devotional service is always pure, but the person rendering that devotional service displays characteristics of ignorance while doing it. Yes. Anything else anyone wants to ask on this? I think it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. So, what does each philosophy or religion of the world, what does it explain? Can you give me, broadly speaking, every philosophy, and particularly every Vedic philosophy, broadly speaking, will explain 5 different things. Anyone want to have a guess as to what those things may be?
Ishwar, Prakriti, Kal, Karm, Jeev. These are 5 topics of...
That's the 5 topics of the Gita. Very good. Let's pick off the mark there. Okay, you got the first 3. Very good. What every philosophy will describe is something called the Tattva Traya, or 3 truths. Tattva means truth. It doesn't just mean truth, it means that truth which stands true in all times, places, and circumstances. And so every philosophy will describe the Tattva Traya, and that means it will describe Brahman, who is the supreme, Jiva, who is the soul, and Jagat, what is matter, or what is the material world. Every philosophy has to describe these 3 things, but not just these 3 things. Every philosophy will describe how these 3 things also interact. because each of them will give a different description, not just of what these three things are, but how they relate to each other and how they affect each other and how they integrate with each other. But there are two other things that every single philosophy must teach us in order for it to be a complete philosophy. Can anyone think of what those other two things might be?
I can guess one. Purpose of life. What is the purpose of life?
Yes, in one sense, but through these three topics, in one sense that will be described, because once you know the jiva, the supreme, and matter, then you kind of will be able to understand that it's close, but not quite. There's two other things that need to be described in every philosophy, and that every philosophy might describe in a slightly different way. Yes?
How to love God.
Okay, yes, that is one of them. Okay. Just hold that thought. Anything else? There's two important questions that every philosophy has to answer.
What is the duty? What is the dharma?
Yes. More specifically? Okay. The two other things that every single philosophy has to describe is, or two questions, is number one, baddha. Why is the jiva bound? How did the jiva end up in this world? Why does this material world exist the way it is? And how did we get here? That's a really, really important question to answer, because until we know how we got here, what was the situation which triggered us to be in this situation, is very difficult to look at progression forward. And so every philosophy will give an understanding of baddha. How is it that we became bound here in the world? And the second thing that every philosophy will answer is mukti. What is the means of release? Once you know how you got here and why you got here and why this whole situation in the material world exists, then it becomes much more easier to understand what is the means of release and how you can actually go back to the original state that you came from. And so all the different philosophies that we're going to look at, all the different religions, but not just all the different religions, all of the different Vedic paths. So for example, within the Vedic path, there are basically, you can say, 4 strands. One is Vaishnavas, who are worshippers of Vishnu. Another strand is Shaivites, who are worshippers of Shiva. Another one is Shaktas, who are worshippers of the feminine divine, the Shakti. And the 4th strand within the Vedic teachings is the Smartas, who are basically an impersonal tradition. So you can say there are many religions, and then within the Vedic path there are basically 4. And of those 4, one path is the Vaishnavas. And in the Vaishnavas, broadly speaking, how many paths are there? Or how many sampradayas? 4. So there is the sampradaya that originates from Brahma, there's the sampradaya that originates from Lakshmi, there's the sampradaya that originates from Shiva, and there's the sampradaya which originates from the Kumaras. And so all of these, actually, when you look at them very, very closely, they kind of seamlessly, you can see how they appeared at different times to basically teach people different things, and that how there's an evolution in kind of thought between all of them. Any questions on this? Yes.
I have a question, but it might be a little bit longer question about Buddha.
Yeah.
I've heard 2 theories about why we're here, and maybe you can elaborate on that. One is that we were on emergent in the spiritual world, and that's why we had that inclination suddenly. Okay, we want to experience what it means to be independent. And we end up here, and second one was we were never there.
Okay, yeah, we're waiting for that question to come. Okay, so what is the understanding on the origin of the jiva and why we're here, basically, is your question.
And sorry, it's only because you said it's very important to understand that
It's
clearly.
very important to understand, yes, it is very important to understand, definitely. Okay, so broadly speaking, now we just talk about the Gaudiya tradition and our immediate teachers. So broadly speaking, there seems to be two perspectives on this. One perspective is that we were originally in the spiritual world, originally with Krishna. And at a certain point, we developed a curiosity, a desire to experience what life would be like to be independent of Krishna. And therefore, because Krishna endows us with free will, and because Krishna doesn't force anyone to be in the spiritual world, so therefore at a certain time, the jiva falls from the spiritual world. Krishna creates the material world as an opportunity for the jiva to go back home, back to Godhead. Did Srila Prabhupada teach this? Yes. In many of his letters, in many of his conversations, he says this, that we were originally with Krishna in the spiritual world, and that the purpose of this life is to go back to Godhead. I mean, he named his magazine Back to Godhead. So how can you go back to a place that you were never in originally? So it seems that Srila Prabhupada was very much teaching this, this understanding. However, it's complex. Because Srila Prabhupada does also seem to make other statements. For example, in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the pastime of Jay and Vijay, where they get cursed, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport there that not a leaf can fall from Vaikuntha. No one can fall. So then some espouse, based on the acharyas and their commentaries, that we have been in the material world since time immemorial, and that we have anadi karma, which basically means we have karma, and that's since a time we can't remember, and by contact with a devotee and getting the seed of bhakti, then one can go back to the spiritual world. So there are these two broad camps of understanding, and whichever one you espouse or whichever one you believe in, you have to admit that there are going to be inconceivable elements. Because if you believe that we fell from the spiritual world, the inconceivable point is, why would we ever want to leave the spiritual world? And if you say we've been here since time immemorial, the inconceivable point would be, why would God put you into a suffering condition when you haven't done anything? That seems also to be like inconceivable. Why would God just put you into this material world where you have to suffer so much? So how do we reconcile it? The jury is still out. But in a beautiful article called Conceiving the Inconceivable, His Grace Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, I think, sheds a beautiful light on it. And this is basically what I'm paraphrasing it, he writes it much better, so I recommend you read his article. But basically, in essence, this is what he describes. Imagine this is the Earth planet, right? And we know there are 7 planetary systems below, and then we know there are 7 planetary systems above, right? So basically, as we know, imagine this is time on the Earth planet, okay? So on this Earth planet, we have a time frame. So what he explains is that as you go higher in the universe, what happens is when you go to the higher planetary systems, say here we're at Brahmaloka now, then what happens is time dilates. isn't it? There's time dilation here. So that one day on Brahmaloka is like 6 months on the earth planet, isn't it? We hear this, right? That basically even Einstein talked about relativity of time. So as you go higher in the universe, time dilates, and ultimately when you get to the causal ocean, which is the kind of, the boundary between the material and the spiritual world, then ultimately time is zero. There is no time. Therefore, the spiritual world is known as a timeless place. So he says, time exists in the spiritual world, but not in the way we understand it. It's not a destructive force. And in one sense, in the spiritual world, there is no time. Although we say Krishna has his Astakaliya Leela and there is morning and evening, in one sense there's no time because nothing decays. The effect of time is that it decays. So basically, there's no time in the spiritual world. Now, Ravindra Swarupa, with the way he explains it, he says this gives the key to understanding why it's so difficult to answer this question in a narrative of English language. Because the question then you have to ask is, can you fall from a timeless place? What would you say? If you say yes, my next question is when? And can you re-enter a timeless place?
Anytime, there's no time.
It's the eternal present.
This is the heart.
So what he's basically saying is that to explain the phenomenon of the jiva leaving the spiritual world and come, if you try to do it in a series of narrative events, that first we were in the spiritual world, and then we fell, and then we met the Hare Krishnas, and then we, got initiated, and then we died and we went back to Godhead. If you try to describe it in a narrative like that, it doesn't work because basically you're involving two different time dimensions. Now, you can't create a narrative of events when you're spanning two different time dimensions. And therein lies the limitation of the human language to describe spiritual phenomena. And that's basically one way in which we can see why this question is so difficult to answer. Because human language has its, it can only describe a certain amount. Like say, for example, if I ask you, who came first, the father or the son? What do you think? Naturally, the father, right? Because without a father, how can you have a son? So naturally, the father comes first, and then the son is born. But I could say you're wrong, because until the son is born, he's not actually a father, just a man. But once the son is born, then he becomes a father. So who comes first, the father or the son? The son. No, the father. No, the son. But it could be both true. But they're completely contradictory. That's okay. Because from different perspectives, they can both hold true. We even find this in the English language. Like, we could say, birds of a feather flock together. Agree? But then we could also say, opposites attract. I could say, the pen is mightier than the sword. Agree? But then I could also say, actions speak louder than words. I could say too many cooks spoil the broth. But then I could also say many hands make light work. So which ones is true? Both of them, but in their own perspective. And therefore the general material mind tries to look at either or and then frame something within that. When in the spiritual reality, because we're spanning different dimensions of reality, it may not be as easy to explain it. in those terms.
Thank you.
I hope that helps in some way to decode. Maharaj, would you like to share anything?
Yeah, there's a phrase, the tyranny of either or. Which is kind of fundamentalist mindset.
Yeah.
And it's not wholesome.
Yeah.
So it's better to be able to accommodate contradictions sometimes.
Yeah.
It all depends on the context.
Yeah.
We do that really well in our philosophy.
Yeah.
It's a very Hindu way of thinking and
Yeah.
being. The culture of India is all about accepting so many different people coming from different parts of the world who bring their theologies, and everyone's kind of welcomed.
Yeah.
There's Jesus and Allah, and everybody's okay. We're all okay. One big family.
We can accommodate the diversity.
Not big kitchen. It's
That's
beautiful that way.
Yes.
It's very inclusive, right?
Yeah.
It's
And even Chaitanya,
exclusive.
and even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy is known as Achintya Beda Beda Tattva. So simultaneously one and different. But how can you be one and different? Yeah, simultaneous. It's inconceivable. So, yeah. One sure way in which Hare Krishnas can give them a headache is give themselves a headache is trying to figure out this question. So, therefore acharyas sometimes say like, when you're in the house and it's on fire, just get out and then figure the rest out later. But yes, it is important to know Bada and why we're here. And even though the specifics of how we reached here may need to accommodate different angles, we ultimately know that our consciousness needs to be realigned in love for God, whichever way you see it. And therefore that consciousness engineering needs to be done. And that's the main point. Any other questions on anything I've said so far? Anyone? Otherwise,
Just my comment, what you were saying about Chaitanya. I think we're just so fortunate to have him in our lives.
yeah.
Because he's not complicated, the situation. He's very inclusive. He's the master of inclusivity. All people, that are welcome to be part of this. And he's not a fundamentalist in that regard. And he embraces chapter 9 from the Gita, Manki Parta Vipasvitya. Everyone can reach the supreme destination
Yes.
through love,
Yes.
and the method is the chanting
Yes.
kirtan process. So, I just feel kind of blessed to be part of that culture. Whereas almost anything else that you look at is going to be exclusivistic.
Some level of sectarianism.
Yeah, which you find amongst the smarter Brahmins. There's a big part of that within Hinduism,
Yeah.
which is very discouraging for a lot of people who are sincere seekers of the truth.
Yeah. And even Bhaktivinoda Thakur beautifully writes, he says, when I go into a church, this used to be a church, I think. He says, I see that here is my same Lord being worshipped, but in a different way, in a different language, with a different culture. But the ability to see the unity and the diversity is such a beautiful thing, something that the world really needs. Okay, all right, there are questions.
I just wanted to ask Manoj, when we said mukti, usually in a very typical, stereotypical manner, the way we understand mukti, it means liberation. But somewhere we believe that the main focus or the main understanding of scriptures comes to unity, our union with God. or going back to Godhead, basically. So here in this context, when you define mukti with Badha, which side or which part are we focusing on?
Yeah, so generally when we talk about mukti in the world today, then it has an impersonal connotation that mukti means to merge again or to become one with the Supreme. Of course, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in Mahaprabhu's teachings, he was a hardcore impersonalist. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu converted him and awakened him to bhakti. And later on, it's quite interesting, he was reading one verse from the Bhagavatam. Tateinu kampam shvishamikshamano bhunjana evat mukhitam vipakam ridvag vapur bhir vidatan namaste jiveta yo mukti pade sadaya bhak. So he was reading this verse from the Bhagavatam. And of course we know Bhagavatam is spotless, it's the spotless Purana. There's nothing cursory, just pure love. But when he was reciting this verse to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he recited the last line and he said, Jiveta yo bhakti pade sadaya bhak. Mahaprabhu said, come again? He said, Bhakti pade sadaya bhak. Mahaprabhu said, that's not the verse of the Bhagavatam. And Mahaprabhu said, Mukti pade sadaya bhak. He said, no, Bhakti pade sadaya bhak. Mahaprabhu said, no, Mukti pade. And then he said, I can't stand to say the word mukti because it awakens a sense of impersonalism. And then Mahaprabhu told him that actually real mukti means to be in connection with the Supreme Lord. So although one sense of mukti in the world is impersonal liberation, ultimately what mukti means is to become free of material influence. And when one is free of material influence, then they can fully love the Supreme Lord. And therefore even bhakti teachers use the word mukti, but they don't, even Krishna's name. What is Krishna's name that relates to mukti?
Mukund.
Mukund. One of Krishna's names is Mukund, which means the giver of mukti, the giver of liberation. So when we talk about mukti, mukti is not just an impersonal understanding of merging again with the Supreme, but in its strictest sense, mukti means release from material attachment, influence, material desire, and in that detachment from material inebriation, then one is fully able to give their heart to God. So even bhakti teachers use the word mukti as well.
So would we say that we can experience mukti, or one can experience mukti while they are here in this world?
Yes, there's a verse by Rupa Goswami. Ihayasya hare dasye karmana manasagira nikala shvikavastasu jivan mukta sajuchate. If you engage your karmana, your activities, your manasa, your mind, your gita, your words, if all of these Hare Dasye are completely engaged in the service of the Lord, Jivan Mukta Sauchyate, even while living, you're already liberated. So you're kind of here, but not really here. Because you're no longer entangled in material desire or material attachment. So you're already liberated.
And Maharaj, the three things that you said around it was your words, your
Karmana,
thoughts,
Manasa, Gila means words. Your actions,
words and thoughts.
actions, words, and thoughts.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I mean, there's more to go through, but I think we will end here because also devotees are going out today, and tomorrow we'll maybe look a little bit more closely at the timelines of the different teachers that come and how they all relate to each other. Thank you very
I'm doing just fine. No. That's gonna happen.